Hey, good morning, Neighborhood Friends Church. Happy Father's Day. Hey, I'm in Breckenridge, Colorado this weekend, suffering for Jesus with my son Leighton. He's at a baseball tournament, but I could not help but feel the emotion tonight of missing church on such a big day like Father's Day. But it got me thinking and asking this question: what is the church? I mean, literally, what is the church? I mean, if I were to ask you to explain the church based on simply using the Bible and absolutely nothing else, what would you say? Because I don't know, I think we got to start there, right? Like anything else, we'll be creating our own ideas, what we like, what we hope for. We'll design it based on something that we get out of it rather than what God has called us to give and create. So let me give it to you this way. Maybe God comes to you and says, hey, I'm really hungry. Could you make me something? You're like, oh, good. I've been on Pinterest and I love vegan stuff right now. It's just all over Pinterest. And I'll make him a nice salad with some beans and hummus. And God's like, I like cheeseburgers. That's what it'd be like, making something other than what God actually asks us to make, described in Scripture. The Scriptures tell us that the church family, when it began, was built on four things that I can see. Number one was this idea of love, that they had this common message together, that everything was shared. What was mine is yours. When you celebrate, I celebrate. When you hurt, I feel that hurt. When you're down, I will do anything in me to take the resources that I have to give you something that might fill your need. This common message of love. That's what it was, a family. But the second common message was this message of we have to tell people. We have to tell people about the redemptive worth of Christ, his love for us. And we have to get that out in real time, not just a hopeful story, but a message of Jesus, his story, his message. And it was based around this idea that literally there are people in our world who don't know him, and we have got to tell them what we have. We have to. It's common message, common gospel message. And the third thing was a common activity. And the common activity was a gathering centered around one thing, the sacrifice of Christ. What Jesus did on the cross was to be talked about all the time, celebrated all the time, prayed at all times without ceasing. In other words, there was this common activity that was based on a common mindset that was strictly Jesus's mindset. Everything was centered around what theologians would say his salvific work through the cross, his desire to live a life that people would follow and die for them. And they began to pray these things, worship about these things, study these things, celebrate these things, sing songs together, always together around this gathering. And the fourth thing was they equipped each other by sending them out, but they trained what they had, people by what they had learned. Leaders in the church literally took what they knew and they taught young believers and new believers how to live like Jesus, not just based off their own likes, but what the Bible teaches, like how to do ministry, how to serve, how to love people, how to care for people, how to be compassionate. And so the big question that I have for us today is this: are we experiencing that at Neighborhood Friends Church? Are you experiencing that? Am I experiencing that? That type of love, that type of gospel mission, that type of gathering, that type of equipping. I think when we do these four things, literally like this forest, nothing is wasted. Nothing's wasted. Christ's work on the cross is not wasted. Have you ever met somebody who literally always seems to have a lot of things and they just let go of them? They get rid of them. Like it's an inconvenience to them that they have it and they just get rid of it. And you're like, why are you wasting that? It's so good. You know what's really sad is when people are treated that way. When children never see their worth and their life just kind of is wasted. When fathers and mothers don't see the worth that they have in raising children and raising a family and being leaders in their home, and how that spills into their work and everyday life, their life can literally become wasted. And I think much of this stems from our language, the church's language, even my language. The other night I was sitting around in my living room having a conversation with my daughter Lillian, who works at Sun Valley Youth Center, the place that we are serving next Sunday. And she was getting so passionate about this discussion, about what she does. And this is what she said. She said, Dad, our language literally has to change. That when a child hears that they are poor over and over, when a neighborhood is labeled as poor over and over, when a dad is labeled as a deadbeat dad over and over, what do you think that they will be, and what do you think, more importantly, they will become? My daughter was teaching me. I was literally speechless. I was thunderstruck. And we become these images of what we believe. We become people by what we believe and what we have heard. But when we believe what God has said of us, it is then and only then that we can be remembered for doing something amazing, because it's His design, it's His church, it's His people. Moses, you probably have heard of him, had this epic ending to life, a very rough middle and a very, very slow, tough beginning. And in Acts chapter 7, Stephen preaches this amazing message that is only preached one time, because after he's done preaching it, he dies. He's martyred. And that's why I'm talking about it on video this morning, so you have no shot at taking me out or something like that. But Moses started out rough, but there was a moment later on in life where everything began to change, and suddenly everything in his past was not wasted. In verse 20 of Acts chapter 7, it says, at that time Moses was born. At that time, remember that. And he was a beautiful child in God's eyes. His parents cared for him at home for 3 months. Everybody say, at that time. I can't hear you. Oh, I forgot video. But they cared for him. The parents loved him, but they had this moment where they had to abandon him in order to save him. And they had to do it because Pharaoh had ordered all the Jewish infant boys to be murdered. And the only way they could save him was to let him go in a basket down the river. You know the story. And he's picked up by Pharaoh's daughter. The man who wants the baby dead inherits the baby, and the family adopts him and makes him a son. Fast forward 40 years, and he goes home back to Israel to visit his people, and he sees a man getting mistreated, and he beats him to death in hopes that the people of Israel will actually believe that God sent him. That was Moses' idea. They never believed that God sent him. They just believed that he was sent to scare them. And the next day he sees two men quarreling, and he attempts to break up the argument, and he says to them, what are you gonna do? Kill me? Kill us like you did the Egyptian? And Moses literally goes into hiding in the wilderness for 40 years, and here's why. Because he had no idea really who he was. He had no idea. 40 years later, 80 years old, it says in verse 30, in the desert near Mount Sinai, an angel appeared to Moses in the flame of a burning bush. And when Moses saw it, he was amazed at the sight. And he went to take a closer look. And the voice of the Lord called out to him, I am the Lord your God. I am the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Moses shook with terror and did not dare to look. And then the Lord said to him in verse 33, take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. Everything that was in his past now was making sense. That nothing from his past was wasted. Nothing from your past is wasted. Nothing. So if you're a dad in the room and you're like, man, I haven't been a good dad, nothing's wasted. In fact, dads, when you were born, you were beautiful in God's eyes. Everybody look at the dad next to him and say, man, you were beautiful in God's eyes. You're not now, but you were. And Moses, listen, what the other translations actually says about him is that he was no ordinary child. The translation for us today is that fathers and mothers and children and grandparents and believers and doubters of faith, people that are on the fringe, you can trust this and know this, that the day that you were born, God had a plan for you, that you were not ordinary, but you were extraordinary, and you were to live an extraordinary life. That everything that you thought you were in the past that doesn't make sense, God's saying right now, the ground that you're standing on, the place that you are in, is making sense because of me. Nothing's wasted because of me. The ground you are on, the place you are on in life, the story that you have lived, the story that you are in currently, no matter what it looks like, God is saying to you and I trust you with that story. I gave you that story. And I'm calling you to live that story out. That nothing will be wasted. What if the church saw life that way? That nothing is wasted, that every person is valuable the way God sees them. Every person is a person that on the day of their birth, God said, this is a beautiful child intended to stand on holy ground and live a beautiful life. When we see everyone that way, the church will flourish. Love will be what we're known for. The gospel is what will literally change ourselves, but the life and the mission that we live and in our world. The gatherings that we have will actually be celebrated, places of celebration and praise and teachings, and it will encourage us to go and equip other people to send them to places they may have never even gone before. That's what's exciting about the church. Hey, this morning, I have a good friend. I'm going to invite him up right now. His name is Alex Kraft. Alex Kraft kind of lives a Moses' life, and he's going to share his testimony this morning. But Alex Kraft also works at Sun Valley Youth Center, and he's got a special integration to that this morning. So welcome this morning, Alex Kraft, and happy Father's Day.